Hello friends, good evening to all of you, and this is 13th session for the preparation of BFM in 15 days. So as I have promised you that we'll be covering the most important modules from the BFM. So we have covered the module B and now it's related to module C, and we've already covered 4 chapters for module C. We have covered chapter number 1, chapter number 2, 3 and 5th number chapter for the CAIIB BFM module C. And now this is the time for us to cover the chapter number 4 and chapter number 6 that's actually related to the risk management and liquidity risk management. So in this video, we will be covering that what is risk management for the treasury and what is liquidity risk management and credit risk management. And also we are going to cover the case studies based upon the asset liability management and the cash reserve ratio. So stay tuned and watch this video till end. And if you have liked our work and you do like our videos and you watch our videos on daily basis, kindly do give this video a thumbs up if you're liking the content, and do share it with your friends and colleagues who are preparing for the CIB so that we can share the word around the people who are preparing for it. Okay. So now without wasting any time, let's jump to the section and we are going to cover the chapter which is actually related to the treasury risk management. So now I've already conveyed the idea to you that treasury is maintaining 3 type of situations. It's basically maintaining the banking book, it's maintaining the trading book, and also the proprietary positions are being maintained by the treasury. Now why the risk management in treasury is required? Let's first jump to this particular conclusion that why the treasury risk management is required. Because whenever the treasury is dealing, whether the treasury is dealing in the securities market, whether it is dealing in the foreign exchange market, whether it's dealing in the capital market, wheresoever it is dealing, it's actually dealing with the market risk. So market risk is definitely present over there. Market risk is actually the risk which is there due to the adverse movement of the interest rates, right? So whenever it's the adverse movement, there must be the interest rate risk, there must be the market risk or the price risk, and that is present everywhere. That is why risk management is required. The second reason, that's treasury also do manages the asset liability management over there. So ALM is also done by the treasury. Now what is ALM? That the liquidity is to be maintained. So whatsoever the liquidity the bank to require, whatsoever the cash flow the bank do require for the different time horizons. We discussed about the maturity ladder, na? That what number of what amount of what quantum of funds you require for overnight basis from 2 to 14-day basis and so on, right? There were 11 buckets we read about, right? So particularly you have to manage the liquidity, you have to manage the assets and liability, and also the gaps are to be managed, right? So if there is any mismatch between the gaps over there, that is also to be managed by the treasury department, right? And definitely whenever we are trying to do that, there will be a market risk which is generated, and also the other operations where the treasury is dealing, the market risk is also present over there. That is why it is required that we should be managing the risk in the treasury. So that was a simple answer to this question, that why it is required, right? Now after that, what are the different concerns with the treasury? Whenever we are trying to do the treasury department, we are handling the treasury department, what are the different concerns with it? First of all, the first very thing that you know, that this operation is highly leveraged. Why we are saying it is highly leveraged? You just do require, let's say, 10 rupees so as to invest in the 100 rupee in particular let's say instrument there, right? So it is highly leveraged. So there is very high leverage which is present in case of treasury. There is very high risk over there, and risk of losing the capital is very much higher. Now let's talk about the credit risk, right? So if the bank has lent rupees 100 crore, it's not the case that the bank will be losing 100 crores over there. The bank must be having some security with it and something like that. And also the bank will be trying to basically have the repayment, so the repayment can be met, right? So bank will be trying the maximum of it, right? So the maximum loss cannot be up to 100 crores over there. It might be related to 10 crore, 50 crore, 60 crore, right? But not the case that the bank will be losing all the 100 crore rupees over there. But definitely that can be crystallized in case of the treasury. So if the bank has invested 100 crore in treasury, it may be the case the bank may lose 100 crore or even more than that, because it is working on the principle of leverage, right? So there is risk related. So that's also a very high concern or very crucial concern the bank must be dealing, right? And for the very low funding requirement is there, as I told you, it is highly leveraged. very low funding requirement is there. In case of the treasury, you do require a very low amount of the capital so as to invest into the treasury, right? And when we are dealing with the treasury, we are doing a very large amount of transactions, very large size of transactions. The ticket size is very higher, right? In case of loan, generally if we talk about the retail banking loan, it's let's say 20 lakh, 30 lakh. But in case of the treasury transactions, it's just like 50 crore, 30 crore or something like that, right? And whatsoever the limits which are granted to the different dealers in the dealing room, those are granted in advance, and you cannot basically take them back as a step of it, right? Let's say that you have given a particular limit to a dealer, that the particular dealer can be into a deal amounting rupees 10 crore. No, it's a case, it's upon the his own judgment that if you want to dive into that particular deal or not, right? So that's actually a very concerning thing for the treasury department. And also the losses in the treasury, those are very materializable. Now those can be materializing in a very short term. Now in case of credit loan, when you have sanctioned a loan, let's say 10 crore, you might be receiving some repayment over 6 months or let's say 3 months or 12 months, and after that the default started to occur. But in case of the treasury, there may be a rapid and very short term loss in it, right? So that can be the case. That's also a very huge concern. And other than it's related to, you are not basically allowed to hold the position for the longer duration. It's not the case that you can be holding the position for the longer duration so as to basically you can be minimizing your losses. It's not the case. So you have to basically put in place the stop loss limits and the other limits over there. You have to set up the different triggers for the same. So we will be learning about all the things, that how we can be limiting the risk and why we need to manage the risk in case of treasury, right? So these were the different concerns which are associated with the treasury over there. Now let's learn that treasury risks are primarily managed by the conventional control. You try to control the things, do not go on the road because you may face an accident. That's the thing that you would basically try to control. You basically try to go for the supervisory measures over there so that you can be controlling the overall risk over there. And these are mostly the preventive steps. These are the preventive steps in case of treasury. I hope that it may help you to understand. Now we will be trying to learn three type of things. It's related to the organizational controls, it's related to exposure ceilings, it's related to the limits in trading positions and stop loss limits over there, right? And this topic over here is the most important topic to me, and further I'll be explaining to you in detail over there. But definitely we are also to learn about the organization control and the exposure limits over there. If you have liked the video so far, kindly give this video a thumbs up if you have liked the content and further you have learned the content. If you have basically basics with you, definitely then you'll be able to answer the questions. Many students do ask me that why you did just teach us, why you basically go for the conceptual part only and we are not able to learn the questions. But let me just tell you one thing, if you are trying to learn the conceptual part, definitely you'll be able to answer the questions. I'm just trying to build your core concepts, your basic concepts and your fundamentals, right? Now, let's learn about it. What are the three different verticals by virtue of which the treasury risks are primarily managed? I have already told you these are the conventional control methods and these are the preventive steps, right? These are the preventive steps. First of all, it's related to the organizational controls. It's related to the organizational control. Whenever we're talking about the organization control, it's actually related to check and balance within the system. Let's say case a transaction is being done. As I've told you, there are three different departments in the dealing room. One, it's related to the front office. The second one, it's related to the middle office. And the third one, it's related to the back office. So the front office was actually responsible for what? All the deals will be entered into by the dealers in the front office. That was the main task of the front office. And the back office was responsible for what? For confirmation of the deals. For confirmation of the deals, right? So whatsoever the deals which are entered into by the front office, the back office will be independently and individually will be confirming the orders, right? And also we'll be looking into the different aspects related to it. Okay, so whatsoever the exposure limits that is being allowed, that will be checked by the particular let's say back office over there. And risk management task and reporting related task will be performed by the middle office, right? Now over here the back office will play a very major role, and further the middle office is actually responsible for the MIS, that is a management information system, and the reporting purposes. Now reporting is very much important. Now, if you do actually report the actual things and write things to the management can definitely be looking into the places that either we are breaching the risk limits or exposure limits or ceilings over there, and accordingly appropriate actions can be taken, right? So it is very much important. The reporting part is very much important. The confirmation is very much important. So that back office also plays a very major role, because risk management start from the back office itself, because the back office confirms the deals, whether a deal is actually confirmed or not, or particularly we are having a particular amount of funds are being available in the nostro account or in the other arenas over there. Are we not out of the funds? So these all petty but important things are looked into by the back office, right? And after that, it's related to the internal controls, right? So second thing, it's actually related to the internal controls. So internal control is basically divided into two parts. First of all, it's related to the position limits, and the second one, it's related to the stop loss limits, right? So it's related to the position limits and also related to the stop loss limits. So internal controls are basically imposed when we are dealing in the foreign exchange market or in the securities market. So when the bank is dealing in the foreign exchange market or dealing in the securities market, internal controls are imposed on the dealers. Why these are imposed? Let's say you are basically free to buy the foreign currency. So it's not the case now that you should be having a free hand. There must be some control, there must be some limit, there must be some, let's say, supposition or assumptions or impositions on you that you should be behaving in such a manner. That's the main thing related to it. And trading limits, if we talk about in the context of a foreign exchange market, there are three types of the trading limits which can be imposed over there. First of all, it could be related to a limit on deal size. That maximum limit size or deal size you can be entering into a particular deal, let's say it is 20 crore. You cannot be entering into deal which is more than 20 crore. For that particular purpose, it may be required that you are to take an approval from the board of directors or anyone else, right? So that may be the case. So that's actually related to the limit on deal size. That's actually related to maximum value for buy and sell contract. So if you are under any of the buying and selling contract, so there must be some upper limit, that this is the maximum limit you can be entering into the contract into, right? And more for more of that, you must be applying for what? You must be applying for the approval. And also it may be related to limit to the open position, that what maximum open position you can enter into. That already, let's say we have purchased 1 lakh USD and the total open position was allowed up to 1 lakh 10,000 USDs. So then extra you can only be going for buying 10,000 USDs and not more than that, because that's the limit on the open position. And the open position could be related to daylight limit, it could be related to overnight limit, it could be related to anything, right? So different limits can be imposed. It may be based upon one day, it may be based upon different time horizons also. Let's say for 2 days, for weekly basis, for bi-weekly basis, even for the yearly basis, the limits can be placed, right? And also it could be related to counterparty limit is placed. It may be related to the particular, let's say, country limit is placed, so that your overall risk can be limited. It may be related to currency wise limited may be placed. So different type of limits can be placed, those limits can be there. Even the gap limit can be there, that if you're basically into overbought condition or oversold condition, what can be the maximum gap related to it. So the board of directors can put in place a different type of limits, right? But majorly if we divide, these are divided into three parts, that is limit on the deal size, limit in the open position, and third one, it's related to the stop loss limit. Now stop loss limit is the last limit which can be imposed. Why I'm saying last? Let's take the case that you purchased a share at rupees 100 and you're speculating that that share price will go up, right? That the share price will go up and you are basically maintaining your position. The very next day the prices drop to 90 days, but you're still hoping that the prices will go up. The very next day it dropped to rupees 80, the very next day it dropped to rupees 75. You're still optimistic that the prices will go up, right? But still the pricing are coming low, right? And you have basically, let's say, fixed the stop loss limit to rupees 50. No, whenever the prices, whenever the price of the same will be coming up to 50 over here, your deal is to be scared of, so that you can limit your maximum losses. So that you can limit your maximum losses, you will be squaring of the deal. Squaring of the deal means what? That if you have already purchased a share at rupees 100, will be squaring of the deal means we'll be selling at rupees whatsoever the price it is, right? And for the, if I'm saying I've already short sell, then I'll be buying, right? So the open position, so the opposite position is to be taken related to equal number of units, that is said to be squared off. Let's say previously I have bought 100 units. Previously, if I have bought 100 units, now I'll be selling the 100 units. That is particularly squaring of the transaction. Okay, so that will be done. So stop loss limit actually represents a final stage. I told you this is the final stage of controlling the trading particular transactions over there. And further, it prevents dealer from waiting indefinitely. So you should not be that much optimistic that the market is particularly drowning, and you should be drowning along with it. So at a particular point, you will be squaring off your position so as to limit your overall losses. Now the stop loss limit, as available in the other cases for the different time horizons, it may be available. It may be available for the overnight basis, it may be available for the weekly basis, or even yearly basis, right? It can be there, right? So that is the main thing related to the different type of limits, trading limits, or we can say trading impositions, which can be placed under the foreign exchange. These are related to the limit on deal size, limit on the open position, and the stop loss limit. We are talking about the type of the particular trading limits in the case of foreign exchange. And now let's talk about the exposure ceiling limits. That what are the exposure ceiling limits? Now I've already explained the idea to you related to stop loss limit, so I'm not going to explain it again in the exposure ceiling limit over there. Now, exposure ceiling limit actually protects the bank from what type of risk? It protects the bank from the credit risk. Now, what type of credit risk can be there in case of the treasury market? Now, in case of the treasury market, the bank is dealing, the department of the bank is treasury department, which is dealing with the other bank or other counterparty, let's say B1, C1. Although we may be dealing with the different banks and they may be having a very good reputation, but definitely is a chance that even they can be defaulting in their obligations. They can be defaulting in the obligations, and that's why there is a credit risk type, that's a counterparty risk is present. Now, counterparty risk is actually related to when the counterparty is not able to fulfill their obligations. That is a default risk. That is a counterparty risk may be present in case of the particular treasury transactions. That is why particularly the exposure ceiling limits protects the bank from the counterparty risk. So the counterparty risk or the credit risk is particularly divided into two types. One, it's related to the default risk. The other one, it's related to the settlement risk over there. So when we're talking about the default risk, it actually means the counterparty risk we're talking about. I've already told you the definition related to it. It may be the different components. Let's say you're dealing in the interbank market or you're dealing in the repo transactions, but definitely the other party may basically impose you some kind of risk, that is a credit risk may be present in that scenario too. And further, the second type of risk which is present in the credit risk is actually the settlement risk. Settlement risk is actually related to when the failure of the counterparty is there so as to deliver their own part, that the settlement was to be done. Let's say A and B parties were dealing, and there was a forward contract that A want to buy 10,000 USDs. A bank wanted to buy 10,000 USDs. Now bank A has paid the amount in INR, but there was actually a particular loss or a particular, let's say, default by the B, that it cannot be paying the USDs or it cannot be delivering the USDs. That is actually what, that is a settlement risk. So whatsoever the risk which is there due to the default made by the other party, but at the time of settlement, or let's say before the settlement or on the date of settlement, that is said to be the pre-settlement risk or the post-settlement risk, which may be present in the case of treasury, right? So we have already read about the same in the case of module A. So if you want to go through the module A videos, those are present in our application, and links for the same will be delivered to you on our CAIIB WhatsApp group. You can be joining the group by WhatsApping CAIIB to the number 83609444207. That is actually given below, right? Now, that was actually related to the different type of controls and limits. One, it was related to organizational controls, other one, it was related to the internal controls, and further it was related to the exposure ceiling limits. So we have learned them all. Now it's related to DVP. Now what is the concept of DVP? DVP is actually related to that when you want to safeguard yourself against the settlement risk. Because why the settlement risk was there? Because A has already paid the part, A has already executed the obligation that was to be done by his own part, but B was not able to. That was why the risk of settlement was there. Now if you want to basically safeguard yourself from the settlement risk, you should be going for DVP, that is a delivery against the payment or delivery versus payment. Now when the payment delivery will be done, only then you'll be paying the amount, but it is not always achievable. Why it's not achievable? Because it may be the case that the banks are in the different time zones. Let's say one bank is in the earlier time zone, the other bank is in the later time zone, then definitely they cannot be concluding. And also it may be the case that there may be the difference in the payments, there may be the difference in the settlements out there. So DVP cannot be ideally achieved in all the scenarios, right? So you should be taking care of the same yourself. We can be putting the limits in place. Let's say concentration risk can be reduced by you're not dealing with single party singularly or majorly over there. And also it may be the case that you should not be having a very large number of deals, particularly which are going to be, mature on a very single day. So such kind of limits can be imposed so as to safeguard yourself from such concern, right? And after that, it's related to exposure limit. Now exposure limit is actually related to, as I told you, there is, so that there is no concentration risk. Why concentration risk? Let's take the case, my all contracts or all the agreements are going to be mature on one single day. Now that's kind of risk which is present. And further, it may also be the case that I am dealing singularly with only one country, right? Let's say I'm dealing with the USA only, I'm not dealing with any other country. Or let's say I'm dealing with party ABC only and not with the other parties. In all these scenarios, the concentration risk is there. So exposure limit is said that what maximum exposure you can be having related to one particular country, one particular counterparty, so that the concentration risk is not there in the scenario, right? That's actually very much important. And the exposure ceilings, exposure limits can be imposed based upon the net worth of the bank, based upon the complexity of the market, based upon the reputation of the bank, based upon the track record of the counterparty. So all these factors should be taken into account while we are fixing the exposure ceilings in case of treasury, right? I'm talking about treasury right now, not about the credit risk. Okay, now let's learn about the market risk. Now why the market risk is there? Let's say case we are having a bond, you have invested into the bond over there. Now as I told you earlier that the bond and the interest rates are having the inverse relationship. Now if the interest rates will fall, the bond prices will go up, and the interest rate will increase, then the bond prices will fall. So there is inverse relationship between the same. So whensoever there is change in the interest rate or in change in the exchange rate over there, and further the change in such a way that is adverse, that is detrimental to your portfolio health, that makes it bleed red, that's actually what that is said to be the market risk or the liquidity risk over there. And market risk will particularly be transforming itself to the interest rate risk, it will be transforming itself to the liquidity risk over there. How come that happens? Let me just explain the things to you. So we'll be learning it through some example over there, right? Now liquidity risk is actually related to what? That when there is cash flow gap, let's say case that you are receiving, that you have to pay 10,000 USDs, you have to pay 10,000 USDs, but 10,000 USDs are not available to you, you are having the balance of 8,000 USDs in your nostro account. Now you have to arrange another 2,000 USDs from some other source, which is quite difficult to get at some particular rate due to the adverse movement of the prices in the market, right? So that is particularly related to the, due to the market risk, you are having the liquidity risk. That's actually the concern, that you are out of the funds, you're not able to manage your obligations right now, you're not basically able to fund the transactions. That is a liquidity risk that is present. And other than that, it's related to interest rate risk. Now interest rate risk definitely will be present when there is mismatch of particular what, there is mismatch of the prices, mismatch of the securities and maturities. So in that particular scenario, the mismatch risk will be there, and interest rate definitely is going to impact your portfolio adversely if there is adverse movement of the interest rate risk. Okay, further, now let's understand the example over here. Let's say case the treasury has borrowed in the call market, that you have basically borrowed for a smaller period, and further you have purchased the government securities or let's say government bonds over there, which are there for the longer duration, which are there for the longer duration. You are basically speculating the next day, that the very next day the prices of the bonds will go up and you'll be getting the profits out of it. But next day what happened, that the prices went down and the interest rate went up and the bond prices came down, and further you are not able to liquidate your position. You are not able to liquidate your position, but you have borrowed the funds from the call market. you have borrowed the funds from the call market, you have borrowed the funds for a short term duration, or let's say for the overnight period you borrowed the funds. Now you have to repay the amounts. You have to repay the amounts. So here what happened, due to the adverse movement of the market, that is due to the market risk, your market risk particularly transformed itself to the liquidity risk. It transformed itself to the liquidity risk. Previously your portfolio value went down due to the market risk, but now you're not able to liquidate your position over there, due to which you're having the shortage of funds and you're facing the liquidity risk now. That's particularly main thing. So currency risk is also the manifestation of what? It is also the manifestation of the interest rate risk. So if there is adverse movement, the interest rate differentials will vary, and ultimately it's going to change the currency prices over there, and ultimately it's going to change the currency, and definitely it may impact you adversely. So it's the currency, it's said rightly over here that currency risk is what? It is manifestation of the interest rate risk over here. Is that clear? Is that particular point clear over here? Now let's learn that how we can be measuring or quantifying the risk over here. We have already learned about these two things. We have already learned about the VAR. We have already learned about the duration. Just let me just give an idea related to the VAR and the duration. Let me just give an idea related to the VAR and duration over here. Let's say the case that the VAR for a portfolio, let's say case that VAR for the portfolio is 6823 with 95% of the probability over the time horizon of 10 days. What does it indicate? It indicates that under the normal trading conditions, that under the normal market conditions, under the normal trading conditions, your maximum loss will go up to 6823. Your maximum loss will go up to 6823 with 95% of the chances, that maximum up to 95% of the cases out of 100, your loss will be limited to rupees 6823, and only 5% chances are there, only 5% chances are there that your losses will exceed rupees 6823. That's all covered under what condition? Under the normal condition it is covered, and it is applicable for the time horizon of 10 days. It is applicable for the time horizon of 10 days. Is that clear? So that is what the VAR means. So that is what the VAR means, and we basically need to look at the Z table values so that we can be we can calculate the VAR value over there. In the very first chapter of the module B, we have covered the same thing. So you can go through the class number 1 and 2, so as you can go through the numerical of the VAR, right? After that, it's related to the duration. Now, if you want to basically reduce the interest rate risk, if you want to reduce the interest rate risk, that you want not to follow the interest rate risk, you should be holding the bond for the duration period. You should be holding the bond for the duration period. Duration is actually they mentioned in years, and it is having always having a negative value. It is always having a negative value, and if you hold the bond for the duration period, in that scenario no interest rate risk will be there. No interest rate risk will be there. It's actually a time period. Duration represents a time period during which you receive the present value of all the cash flows, during which you will be receiving the present value of all the cash flows. That is what, that is the duration. So interest rate risk ceases in that scenario. Clear? Interest rate risk ceases in that scenario, particular scenario. Okay. And what is the formula for the duration? It is, duration is, formula is sigma PVT, PV dot T, that is time, and divided by the present value of the bond. This is the formula related to duration. And also we are having the concept related to modified duration. Modified duration is having the formula related to duration divided by 1 plus R, right? Where R is equal to YTM, that is yield to maturity, divided by N, that is frequency of receiving the coupon. Okay, so this is actually related to duration. This is actually related to duration. Lesser is a duration, better it is. Lesser is a duration, better it is considered. Okay. Now let's move to the another point in case of the concept, and that's actually We are going to cover the new concept over here related to the BFM, that further related to yield to maturity. Now, what is yield to maturity? Now, let's consider that you are having a 1000 rupee bond. We are having a 1000 rupee bond where you're receiving a coupon of 10% and the maturity is in 3 years. Maturity is in 3 years. Let's say the current market price at which the bond is trading is 850 rupees. Is 850 rupees. Now, YTM is actually that discount rate. YTM is actually that discount rate at which the current market price of 850 will become equal to, that the present value of the bond will become equal to the current market price. So it is that particular discount rate at which the present value of the bond will become equal to the current market price. Okay, is that clear? Or we can simply be saying it is a rate of return that will be earned by the investor who purchases the bond and hold it till the maturity, and holds it till the maturity. That's also said to be the YTM, that is yield to maturity. That is also said to be the YTM, that is a yield to maturity, right? So that is a definition related to it. That is a definition related to it. And further, it does not reveal the volatility of the bond prices. So YTM never let us know about the volatility of the bond prices. And YTM of the two bonds may be the same. It may be the case that the YTM of bond 1 and bond 2 is same. Let's say YTM of bond 1 is 6%, of bond 2 is 6%. It may be the case, but it may vary on account of varying maturities and further due to the different frequency of the coupon payments, right? So it may work differently for the different bonds even though the numbers may be the same. Okay, so that's actually related to the YTM topic, that is yield to maturity. I hope that you must have understood the concept. And further, if you want to go for the case study of the duration and further VER, that is already we have covered in the previous videos. So looking at the time constraint, we are not going to cover for the same period, right? And after that, we are going to start with the module C, next chapter, that is chapter number 6, that's actually related to the asset liability management. So now we are going to cover the next chapter over here, that's actually related to asset liability management. Now, what are the different assets for the bank? Let's say case if the bank has invested the money somewhere, or bank has lent the funds, in that scenario, that will be what? That will be the, those will be the assets for the bank. And if we look for the liability part, the bank is to repay the deposits, repay the deposits or whatsoever, let's say borrowings have been done by the bank. Whatsoever the borrowings, let's say bank has borrowed the amount from the Reserve Bank of India, or the bank has borrowed the from the interbank market out there. So those will be the liabilities for the bank. Those will be the liabilities for the bank, and the bank is to manage the assets as well as the liabilities. That is to be done, and that particular part is played by whom? Asset liability management is done by the Treasury Department. That's a, that is a traditional work which is being done by the Treasury Department. Okay, so bank collects the deposit from the bank. As I've already told you, the bank do collect the deposit from the public, which are which are having the varying maturities, and it may be ranging from the 7 days to 10 days. It may be ranging from 7 days to 10 days, and the funds so collected by the bank, those are used for the lending purposes. Like the bank can be lending it for 1 year, 2 year, maybe for 15 years even, right? So there will be always be a mismatch. There can be a mismatch between the assets and liabilities. So credit risk in the bank is obvious that definitely the credit risk can be there. So credit risk is also present at each and every step, but it can be managed. Like we can be using the credit risk derivatives, we can be using the credit derivatives, or we can be monitoring the loans over there, and further loan management can be done, loan management can be done. So all these things can be done in that scenario. But in case of the Treasury Department, market risk is present. Market risk is present, and it may also lead to the liquidity risk, it may lead to the currency risk, it may lead to the interest rate risk in the banking operations, which requires supervision and further pro approach, so that we can limit the market risk, so that we can limit the market risk. Is that clear? Is that particular point clear to you? Okay, now let's learn more about it. Let's learn more about it. So for example, let's suppose that the bank has actually accepted a deposit of 3 years at 8% per annum. Let's consider the thing that the bank has accepted a deposit. So there is deposit, so it's 0, 1, 2 and 3, and this deposit is going to mature after 3 years. Okay, and the bank has received it at 8% per annum. The deposit is received by the bank at 8% per annum, and the bank is actually using the funds so as to lending purposes on 90 days discounting facility. So let's say a bill was given by the company over there, and the bill was discounted by the bank, and the loan for 90 days for 3-month period was given. For 3-month period, the loan was given over here. Now, let's say case the bank has lent the money at 8% per annum, and the bank has particularly accepted the deposits at 8% per annum. And let's say case the bank has lent the money, the bank lent the money at 11% per annum. Now, what was the net interest income, or what was the spread which was being earned by the bank? The spread was 11% minus 8%, that is equal to 3%. But let's say after the 3-month period, the loan which was granted by the bank, it was granted just at 6%. Let's say CC limit was sanctioned for 1 year period, and it was sanctioned at 6%. Now, what will be net interest income? The net interest income will be negative, because it will be 6 minus 8%, that is equal to minus 2%. The bank is not even able to cover the initial particular amounts which the bank is paying to the depositors. Is that clear? So it may be the case. So that is why management is to be done, because market risk is present. So the management is to be done in such a manner that you are able to manage, you're able to manage the mismatches, you're able to manage the net interest income, and further the different spreads. Okay, so that's the case. So clearly there is a negative earning in that particular scenario while the bill discounting, and further definitely, as I told you, in case when the bank has received the deposit at 8%, in that scenario the bank is receiving a fixed interest rate. The bank is receiving a fixed interest rate. But in this scenario, the fixed interest is not there. And further there is repricing of the interest. There may be repricing of interest after every 90 days. After every 90 days, there will be repricing of the interest rates, which may impact the bank's income. Okay. So that is a need related to that why we should be managing the market risk. Okay. Now further, let's learn about the liquidity risk and the interest rate risk. Now the bank should be extra sensitive related to the liquidity risk over there. Why? What is a liquidity risk? Let's the case that you have received a deposit for 5 years. You basically received a deposit for 5 years. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, right? You basically received a deposit for 5 years, which is going to mature after 5-year period. And further, let's say case you lent a loan to a customer for 7 years. For a car loan, you basically granted the loan, let's say for 7 years. This is 6 and this is 7. Now after 5 years, if the deposits are not continued, the amount is to be repaid to the depositor. The amount is to be repaid to the depositor. So you have to basically manage the flow for this particular loan. So the flow for this particular loan is to be managed, and further the funds are to be taken from some other sources, because the money you basically are to return, that is already lent to the borrower. And you have to arrange the funds, and it may be the case that you're not able to arrange the funds at 8% per annum which you were paying previously to the previous depositor. Now that will lead to what? That will lead to the liquidity risk, because you are not having appropriate liquidity with you, right? So that's the funding risk or the liquidity risk which is present over there. Okay. So in ALM, in case of the asset liability management, so whatsoever the assets we are having, we are earning income out of it. And the assets showcase what? Assets means what? We are talking about the income we are receiving from the assets. That we are receiving what? We are receiving the interest from these assets over there, and also some principal amount is also repaid back, right? So we are basically receiving the money from the assets. From what type of assets? From the maturing assets. We say them to be the maturing assets over here. So in case of the maturing assets, we are earning a yield. So there is a cash inflow. So there is a cash inflow in case of the assets. And if we talk about the particular part of the liabilities, if we talk about the particular part of the liabilities, or we can simply say maturing liabilities, we are to pay an interest rate. We are to pay an interest rate over here, right? So the maturing liabilities, there is a cash outflow. So there is cash outflow in case of the maturing liabilities and cash inflow in case of the maturing assets. Is that clear? Is this particular point clear to you? Okay, so in case of the maturing liabilities, there is cash outflow, and in case of maturing assets, there is cash inflow. This point is very much important to understand the other basics of this chapter. Okay, now let's look the points over here. So the assets yield income. So these are shown as cash inflows over here. Whereas in the case of the liabilities, those are to be repaid. So these are shown as the cash outflows over there. So definitely there can be a mismatch. Let's say case over a time horizon of 1 month. Let's take the case for over a time horizon of 1 month, we are to pay cash outflow of 100k. 100k cash outflow is there, and we are going to receive, that is cash inflow. So we are talking about cash outflow over there, and this scenario we are talking about cash inflow, and cash inflow is amounting 80k over there, right? So if we say that the maturing assets, if the maturing assets are lesser than that of the maturing liabilities, so maturing liabilities means the risk sensitive assets and risk sensitive liabilities, RSL, right? So if the assets are more than the RSL over there, that assets, that inflows are more than the outflows, or simply we can say that the cash inflow are greater than the cash outflow, then that's a positive gap. That's a positive gap. Okay, but the opposite case is, if the risk sensitive assets are lesser than the risk sensitive liabilities, that is the cash inflow is lesser than that of the cash outflow, the cash inflow is lesser than the cash outflow, in that scenario what kind of gap it will be? It will be the negative gap. It will be a negative gap because the bank is having the shortage of funds. In this scenario there are surplus funds. There are surplus funds in this scenario, and in the above scenario where we are having the negative gap, there is shortage of funds, and it's a very huge concern. In case you're having surplus funds, it means what? It indicates that you're not able to manage the liquidity properly. You may have particularly invested the money in other avenues or other resources so as to earn more, but you're not able to do so. And further, one more important point: if inflow and outflow is having the currency mismatch. So over here we talked about just one currency, but it may also be the case that you are receiving or paying the money in the different currencies. It may be the case that you are paying the amount in USDs, and also it may be the case that you are receiving the amount in different currencies over there. So for those all different currencies, where you are having the different currencies, you have to manage the mismatch position for the different currencies differently. You have to basically manage the mismatch positions for the different currencies differently over there. That is the case, right? So I've already made you understand what we meant by the positive cash flow. Positive cash flow, when the cash surplus is there, that the whatsoever the cash inflows, those are going to be more than the cash outflows. So where the cash inflow is greater than the cash outflow, that's the scenario of the positive cash flow. And negative cash flow will be there where the case is cash outflow are greater than the cash inflows, right? That is the main case. Now after that, we do consider different time buckets or different maturities over there, over the different time horizons, so we will be learning related to it. So Reserve Bank of India has particularly prescribed the time bands for the same, like for 1 to 14 days, 14 to 29 days. So it is 1 to 14 days band, and for the 14 to 29 days band, and for the 1 month to 3 month band, and so on, right? So these are the different bands where we should be managing the liquidity, and for the The risk is not being able to find enough cash. Let's say the risk would be related to what? Let's say if the negative gap is there, amounting 300k, that is you are short, having the shortage of funds amounting 3 lakh rupees over there, and you're not able to basically meet up this shortage of funds. That is a risk imposed to you. And the risk could be related to what? Let's say case previously we have deposits with us at 6% per annum, but now we are able to arrange 300k at, let's say, 7% per annum. Definitely it's a risk which is present, because definitely we have to pay more amount and it will lower our earnings. So it's a kind of risk which is available there, right? So that may be the case. And also liquidity risk may rise. I've already told you, if the liquidity in the market dries up and the bank is actually not able to dispose of its liquid particular assets. Let's say case that you are having the liquid assets, with you, and you may have mobilized the funds selling your liquid assets in the market, but right now the market is liquid, and further you are not able to square of the transaction, you're not able to sell that particular asset in the market over there. In that scenario also, the liquidity risk will arise. What risk will arise? The liquidity risk will be there for that scenario, right? So that can be the case. And there are some other guidelines which are very much important to understand. One, it's related to that the for the net cumulative position, that the net cumulative cash outflow for the particular day should not be exceeding, for next day the volatility should not be exceeding 5%, for 2 to 7 days it should not be exceeding 10%, and for 8 to 14 days it should not be exceeding particularly 15%, and for 15 to 28 days it should not be exceeding 20% over there. That the net cumulative cash outflows should not be exceeding than that. Net outflow means what? Let's say case we were receiving that the cash inflows were amounting 100k, and the outflow, let's say these are the outflows and these are the inflows. So let's say inflows were 100k and outflows are 150k. Now in this scenario, net outflow would be what? Net outflow is 50k. This is representing what? This is representing net outflow. Now net cumulative outflow from the all the different sources related to the assets and liabilities falling under the different time, falling under the single time band, should not be exceeding 5% for the next day, right? And further 10% for 2 to 7 days, 15% for 8 to 14 days, and 20% for 15 to 28 days. That's a guideline that is given by Reserve Bank of India. And this may be covered in the case study too. This may be asked in the form of case study too. So I'm marking over here, it's important to note it down. It's important to take a note of it. Okay, if you have learned the concept so far, so kindly please give this video a thumbs up, and further do let me know if you're having any query related to it. If you're still having any query related to it, kindly do let me know so that we can be resolving the same. The next one is related to interest rate over there. So I've already just given a gist to you related to RSA and RSL. RSA means risk sensitive assets. RSA means risk sensitive assets. Those particular assets which there for which there will be change of value due to the change of interest rates. Those are RSAs. And those liabilities for which change of interest rate will alter their value, those are said to be the risk sensitive liabilities. Those are said to be the risk sensitive liabilities. So you should be understanding the risk sensitive assets and the risk sensitive liabilities, because we are going to cover the case studies based upon the risk sensitive assets as well as the risk sensitive liabilities. And we say them to be the risk sensitive assets and liabilities if the value do change due to the adverse movement of the interest rates, right? That is related to RSA and RSL. And definitely the gap could be related to it. The one gap we learned about, it was due to the cash inflow and cash outflow gap. That was cash inflow and cash outflow gap. Other gap it could be related to the differences between the RSA and RSL, that is a risk sensitive assets and the risk sensitive liabilities. Let's take the case that the bank is having 10 lakh risk sensitive assets and the bank is having 7 lakh risk sensitive liabilities. Can the bank using the different conditions so as to make the money out of it? Kindly do let me know at the earliest. Can the bank be managing these things so as to make the profit out of it? These are the risk sensitive assets and these are the risk sensitive liabilities. These are the risk sensitive liabilities. Definitely there is always a gap between the same thing, and whenever the gap is there, you can be making the money out of it. you can be making the money out of it. So there may be some tweaks that you can be working upon and you can be making money out of it. Let's say case the price of the share is rupees 100 right now, that you sold it for rupees 100 and later on you bought it at rupees 90, you still made a profit out of it. That is particularly said to be what? This process it's said to be short selling. This is said to be short selling, right? So same way we can be working on upon the RSA and RSL so as to make the money out of it, right? So now let's learn the role of treasury ALM. And that is the only reason I just told you that the new age banks are more relying on the short term deposits rather than on the long term deposits over there, because the short term funds are available at lower cost. Let's say case the bank is going to borrow the money from the interbank market. From the interbank market, the bank is going to borrow the money, and that money will be a cheaper money, we can say. That money will be available at the lower interest rate. That will be available at the lower interest rate, and the bank is going to invest the money in different investments. Those more maybe the loans, or those may be the investments which may be for longer durations, which may be for the longer duration. And on the same hand, the bank may be enter into a interest rate swap. We have already learned about the derivatives over there, right? So the bank may be entering into interest rate swap so as to lock in the interest rates, so as to lock in the interest rate. So this way the bank will be borrowing at the lower interest rate and further for the short term period, and also still at the same time will be lending it for the longer period and still managing to lock in the interest rates over there and further earning higher spreads, still earning higher spreads. So these things can be managed easily. That is why treasury is very much crucial task for banking these days. Okay, now we are going to learn about the role of treasury in ALM. I've already told the ideas to you, but let's learn more about it, right? First of all, it's a core function of the treasury for the fund management. Fund is to be managed. Why? Because the treasury is to manage the CRR, the treasury is to manage the SLR requirements, and also if there is any liquidity gap, if there is any kind of liquidity gap, that is also to be managed by the treasury. So the treasury is to anticipate that what amount the bank may be requiring for the different time horizons. The treasury will be looking for the maturing assets as well as for the maturing liabilities and will be managing the different gaps in between, right? So treasury which actually operates between the different market, let's say financial markets directly, so that will be basically establishing a link between the core banking function and the market operations over there. I've already told the idea to you that how it is being done. So this point we have already covered, right? Further, treasury also makes use of the derivatives. Treasury use the derivatives so as to manage the risk, over there, so as to manage the liquidity and the interest rate sensitivity gaps over there. And also, as I told you, treasury is exposed to market risk at each and every single point, right? So whenever, even if you're basically dealing in the market, trading in the market, you are basically having exposure in the market, you are dealing with the interest rate risk, you have to manage that, right? And further, it may be the case the bank may subscribe to commercial paper, so you must be looking for the new age products. So how come the new age products? Let me just give an idea related to it. Let's say case company XYZ is there, and treasury is to manage the capital. The treasury is to manage the capital. Now, if the bank lends to this particular concern, let's say if the working capital is to be sanctioned to this particular concern, for that particular purpose, it will be on balance sheet exposure. First of all, it will be a on balance sheet exposure, that is clear. And further, it is fund based exposure. It is fund based exposure, right? And moreover, as we have sanctioned the short working capital, it is for short term period. It is for the short term period. So these are the very common points which must be clear to you, and definitely there will be the credit risk which may be present, and the credit risk is present over there. Now for that particular case, what can be done? The treasury may be subscribing to the commercial papers, because the commercial papers are the unsecured money market instruments, which are issued in the form of the promissory notes. These are the commercial papers we are talking about. I've already given a lecture related to the commercial papers before. We have learned the different products of the treasury over there, where we have covered the commercial papers too. So the commercial papers are issued for the short term duration, maximum up to 1 year of the maturity, and further these fulfill the criteria of the funds required for the short term, that is for the day to day basis, that is for the working capital. So the same thing is actually done by the working capital, and same thing can be particularly maintained and contained by using the commercial paper. So why to basically depend upon the very traditional methods? We can be going for the newer methods too, right? Because these treasury products are marketable. You cannot be disposing of the loan. Let's say case the bank do require funds. So can you be sending, because can you be selling a loan? Can you be selling a CC limit out there? It's quite difficult. It's doable, but it's difficult, right? But in case of the commercial papers, there is a secondary market which is existing over there. There is a secondary market which is there. So you can be selling your commercial papers, and that will be all done. And that will be all done. So that can be easily done in case of the commercial papers, but cannot be done. It cannot be disposed of that much easily in case of the working capital limit. Is that clear? Okay, so that is the case related to it. In the next video, we'll be learning the use of the derivatives, and further we'll be covering the case studies also, which is very much important. So these are the very important topic that we'll be covering in the next video tomorrow. And further, just in 2 days we are going to complete our 15-day series. Just give me some suggestions that after that what particular subject you want me to cover. Do let me know in the comment section below. And further, if you have liked this video, if you have learned the concepts from this video, do subscribe to our channel right now and press the bell notification icon so that you get updated whenever we upload the new video. So that will be all related to this. Thank you so much, and see you again in the next video.